His content is always just so phenomenal that people were like, okay, this was great. I want to discuss this. It really just started with probably Lenny and her realizing, like, who is this guy? Like, he seems like he has nothing better to do than hang out here. We should maybe find a way to work with him. I read every single message every day on the Slack, on like public channels. I did it 2.5 years ago, and the community was maybe 3x smaller. I still do it today. I read
Wait, all the channels?
all the channels.
Oh my God.
Some things just are not scalable, right? Reading every single message on every public channel, that's like the best kind of like incubation process of just like observing people when there's no like immediate incentives in play. We typically have over 20 meetups a month in 4 continents of the world. I was just noticing on the US based channels that like people wanted to meet up, right? And it like broke down because people couldn't agree on a time and a place and a date. The big one is just like setting up a kind of meetup guide. How I say it is, if you want to be the meetup host, you rule like a monarch. In an ideal world, they pick the time, the place, and everything else we take care of. We give them a small budget where they can get some food. We take care of the distribution. We basically almost guarantee that they'll have people show up. We have an awesome volunteer team that just like tag team it to take on the mentor-mentee program that we run. I had actually discontinued it because the effort required was just too large. And all of these people were like, no, actually, we think it's great and we care about it so much that we're actually gonna help run it. My lens of volunteers is like, ideally you are someone that just naturally cares about this thing, because then it just doesn't feel as much as work. We had a poll recently done on the community. The question was like, what motivated you to become a paying subscriber, and more importantly, what will make you stay? And there was just short of 50 people who answered, and the answer with the most kind of upvotes was, being part of an uplifting community via Slack makes me feel supported.
Welcome to Beginner Maps, where we interview operators of top community businesses so that you can replicate the best of what these community builders have already figured out. Today, I am thrilled to have Shre with us. Shre is the Chief of Staff and Head of Community for Lenny, where he leads the community efforts for the famous Friends of Lenny's newsletter community. This community comes bundled with a paid subscription for Lenny's newsletter. And at the time of recording this podcast, there are more than 17,000 members in this community. So I believe this provides a great template for the kind of community that other creators with audiences can build in order to just monetize their audiences and build a business around it. But even more than that, build a new level of connection with their audiences. Shre, I'm super thrilled to have you here and talk about all of this magic that you've created.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nitesh.
Shre, how would you describe the people who join this community?
Yeah, I think it's a community filled with, there's obviously product managers, and there's a fair few of them, but I think over time, as Lenny's podcast and newsletter has also gotten bigger, it's also just touched upon a lot more other functions within technology. So we do have quite a few people in growth, in design. We have founders for sure. We have a couple of like user researchers. When I say couple, I probably mean like a couple hundred. So it's really, I would start thinking about it as like product adjacent like functions. So yeah, we have quite a few different functions within tech. I've also started to see some people in like sales and revenue functions, because I guess it all touches upon everything, right? If you hear content around like product and entrepreneurship and some of the themes that Lenny touches upon, I'm sure anyone who's remotely interested in technology is slowly starting to tune into it as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with the podcast that Lenny recently started, that being so big, people who want to connect is only getting larger, and it's not just a community for product managers now.
Yeah, definitely. It's just gotten so much bigger from when Lenny started this a couple of years ago. So it really is a mix. We definitely have students as well. Should have pulled up like a rough number of demographics like before this, but we definitely have quite a few students as well who are even like remotely interested in.
Correct. And anecdotally speaking, just from your experience of what you've seen and what you've heard from the members, what are the main benefits that people feel from joining the community?
Yeah, I think our community is so big that it's hard to pinpoint a few reasons. And when I say big, it's over like 15,000 members. I think the top ones that resonate are that one, as you pointed out, people want to like connect and discuss about like Lenny's podcast or newsletter, right? Because typically his content is always just so phenomenal that then people, and I think that's how the early days started. People were like, okay, this was great. I want to discuss this. So I think there's that definitely like connection element of it. And our community is so global that I think people really enjoy that aspect of it. So I think that's number one. I think that, and then I think some of the other benefits just depends on what people want. There's definitely a huge segment of people who crave like in-person connection, and we have meetups around the world where people can find out first about them and really participate in them as well. I've heard from a few people who essentially use it as some form of a product kind of search engine of sorts, in the sense that if they're stuck with something at work, they just search the Slack in case someone's posted or asked a similar question about it before. I really think of the community almost as like a verticalized like Reddit, but instead of it being anonymized, we have pretty good community guidelines on removing that bit. But there's just so much content geared around how you think about product and all the kind of different stakeholders that kind of involves. So yeah, I'd say those are three ones: like connection, probably an in-person aspect, and then just like this huge repository, this wealth of like product related questions and answers and content.
Yeah. I'm sure like at this point there are people who are joining the subscription, like the newsletter subscription, just because they want to join the community, like I did basically. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. I really think that the community has grown to be something where people just want to be part of. I think what people constantly tell me is that this is just like the best product community like out there. I'm sure there's some very good ones out there, but I think that's one of the main things. And access into the community is that you are a paid subscriber of the newsletter. So it's actually like a quote unquote like free add-on benefit to being a paid subscriber of the newsletter. So I think that kind of value proposition of not only do you get more Lenny content, which is for premium people, but you also get like the access to the Slack community for under $15 a month. I think just appeals to a lot of price points, like not just in the US, but like around the world.
Totally, yeah. It's unreal because every community subscription, apart from this one that I have, and like I impulse buy a lot of community subscriptions, this is the cheapest one. And that's true. Most people just start their like community and put on a paywall starting at say minimum $30 a month. And that doesn't even come with all the premium content.
Yeah, definitely. I think we haven't revised community pricing at all since I joined, and that was like 2.5 years ago. I'm not sure if that's something we should or will do at some point. It's definitely not on the cards, but where the community was 2.5 years ago and where it is now, I think are two pretty different places. And I think the best part is that I, in this case, as in you, kind of just see, I love seeing these messages where someone talks about a mentor that they met or someone that they met at an in-person meetup or something like that, where this community just helped them had a very tiny part in their like work life or whatever, but they're very grateful towards it. And I think compared to like other communities, we don't really do it to make money. Like it's not, Lenny's never asked me for like a revenue, like what's a revenue from the community, or like he sets a target for it. I think the whole premise of it really has been like, hey, like here's a bunch of listeners or subscribers. I think there's a lot more we can do with this to create like a great kind of place on the internet for them. That's been it. Like never, if we can make money somehow in a way that we think is like very user first, we'll obviously explore it. But like I said, he's never asked me for it. And I think that trickles down. I think people feel it as well in the community, right? People definitely feel it, that there isn't excessive spam or where, yeah. I could go on about this. I'm sure you ask some questions, so I'll stop myself there.
No, this is really interesting that the reason why you're doing this community isn't to basically go in with the mindset of reducing churn for the newsletter pro subscription. I'm sure like when you say this, reducing churn is probably not even a metric, success metric for the community.
It's not. I know that it helps. We had a poll recently done on the community. I actually didn't ask it. I stumbled upon it, and I was like, "Wow, this is great." The question was like, what motivated you to become a paying subscriber, and more importantly, what will make you stay? And there was just short of 50 people who answered, and the option with the most kind of upvotes was being part of an uplifting community via Slack makes me feel supported and less isolated. You know,
Wow.
keep in mind, like I said, it's biased because it's people already on Slack, right? Versus like across the total pool of paid subscribers. But that's super heartwarming to hear because when you have 15,000 people, sometimes I do things and I'll like work with Lenny on things and you're just not fully sure if it will make a difference, right? I've always thought of the community as almost this, I think of the members as my users and how I should and would build products for them. That's how I think about it. I just don't have designers or engineers necessarily to work with, but any kind of community program is very much thought through that lens. Obviously, Lenny was a very successful PM. I was a very early stage PM back in my PM days. So both of us together really try to like anything new or anything how we want people to feel in the community. We try to be really considerate about that. We obviously don't do a perfect job, but we're always striving to do better.
Love this. I think there's a good moment for telling the listeners the story of how you started working in this community. You went from becoming a community member to managing this community, basically. So can you repeat that story for the listeners?
Yeah, definitely. It was around 2.5 years ago, and I'd already taken around a couple of months off from work. So I quit my PM job. I used to work in SF as a PM, and I was just like, saved enough and paid off any debt. I'm going to take a year off and just figure out what I want. And I think a couple of months into that, and this was already when early-ish days of the Slack, I think I was pretty active on the Slack because I genuinely didn't have a job. I didn't have many better things to do. And I think the person who was like community moderating reached out and noticed and was just like, hey, you're pretty active here. Would you want to play a part? And I was like, yeah, sure. I sent her some stuff. And then I think Lenny reached out to put in some time. So I think it really just started with probably Lenny and her realizing, like, who is this guy? Like, he seems like he has nothing better to do than hang out here. We should maybe find a way to work with him. And you'd have to ask Lenny, we'd have to ask Colleen, like, what made me stand out. I don't think I was, like, saying anything revolutionary, to be quite honest. I think I was just, I had a lot of time and I wanted to read, I wanted to consume, information, I wanted to engage with people. Probably a big part of the reason why other people join the community or stay. And I think back then it was very much just, hey, the Slack is blowing up. The newsletter is also blowing up. There was no podcast. And then it was just like, kind of like, I don't have as much time to spend moderating the community and just trying to make sure everyone's respectful, no one's being mean or unkind, and just making sure we really have the right kind of like guidelines in place because it really was growing at a pace that I think neither of us, I wasn't a community manager at that point, and I don't think Lenny had managed a community then. So we didn't exactly have domain experience. So the premise was basically just keep an eye on this, just make sure it's like a good place on the internet, if I had to really summarize it. And I think one thing led to another, and I think that just led to me taking on like more and more responsibility. 2.5 years later, here I am. It definitely wasn't planned on either side. I didn't think a job like this existed. So yeah, that was that's how it started.
It's a really cool story. Tell us what are maybe some of your key areas of responsibility right now with this community?
Yeah, I'd say one is just like one-on-one community management, and that's what I was originally hired for. Just make sure it's a good place on the internet. Make sure, no one's being unkind. Increasingly, like people who are using the community for like marketing or self-promotional reasons is something we have pretty strict guidelines on. So I think making sure that is being respected. So yeah, just one-on-one kind of community management, like community hygiene, right? It's a good place. It's like a relevant place for the internet. We don't want it to be like a high noise kind of community, right? We want the noise to be like pretty low, and that will continue to be a challenge as we scale because every day we get new members. So that's number one. I think number two is like existing community programs. Thankfully, have a great kind of a small team of people, volunteers, and some like admin support via RIA that help with just running some awesome initiatives, whether that's meetups, whether that's like the mentoring program. What are the existing programs we currently like have in place? We have Ask Me Anythings that you probably saw / like fireside chats. And then there's like the new programs that I pretty much work by myself with. And the whole premise of this is what's something new we could roll out that the community A wants and B works and we do a pretty good job of it. That's like that bar. And there's a few things there. Interview prep has been like one of them, and that's a form of tapping into the community with a coach and then a job seeker that's willing to pay the coach or like the more experienced person, let's say. So there's new programs there, and co-founder matching has been one of them that's been a bit stalled, and I'll take that on. I'm really hoping to release that over the next few weeks. So yeah, there's Community 101, existing programs, making sure they run smooth with with a pretty small team, and then new programs that I take on. And if we feel like it doesn't meet our bar for excellence, then we kill it. We kill, say, whatever new program. And if it does, if we do think we do well, then I think about how can we scale this through automations or through working with a small team of people that are like really passionate about this, basically. And then I'd say the fourth and last bucket is just ad hoc kind of general things like as they pop up. I can't really go into them too much, but these are more like Lenny specific requests, as you can imagine, that like Lenny probably gets a few like inbound about different things. I don't think there's anything I can talk about now. Maybe one would be that I think Lenny is thinking of coming to London in July, and he hasn't done like a meetup with. He hasn't come himself to a Europe-based meetup. I think if we have him over, that'll be pretty exciting just because that's the first. He's based on the west coast of the US, and he doesn't really travel to Europe that much, and that's the only reason why we haven't done something like this before. But they're more specific one-off projects that tend to be pretty interesting. Obviously, you probably read he's doing like a fellowship where he's going to be working with 3 writers. I'm not closely involved with that, but there are like some things that I'm getting like looped into. So it's very like specific projects basically. So those are the 4 things that I do. Community 101, existing projects, like incubating new ones, and then like Lenny specific ad hoc projects.
Got it. So we will spend the bulk of this interview talking about these projects and the initiatives that you have and how we do it. But before that, I want to ask like a meta question. So as you mentioned, you have never managed a community before this, and now you are managing like one of the biggest communities, the biggest private communities on the internet, and running all of these programs here. So how do you learn about, I guess, a good way to execute these community programs? Let's say whether it's the meetups or book club, AMA, mentee matching program. Do you have any inspirations? Do you draw any inspirations, or is it just putting on your product builder hat?
I think for almost all of them, I lead myself for the first time, maybe the second time too. So I will like literally come up with it probably. How the whole process starts is I read every single message every day on the Slack on like public channels. I did it 2.5 years ago, and the community was maybe 3x smaller. I still do it today. I read
Wait, all the channels?
all the channels.
Oh my God.
I skim through it, right? I can quickly
Yeah.
identify what's interesting, what's not. I've been doing this every day for the last, at least, I don't know, like 800 days. So that's what I do. I'll definitely miss some things, but it gets highlighted through like some other ways. But I do it every day, and I try to just pattern spot. So like the whole notion of meetups, for example, came out because this was like, I think I can't remember if it was 2021 or 2022, but it was when like vaccines were starting to be rolled out in the US, and a good chunk after basically both people had both shots, at least in the US, right? And I was just noticing on the US based channels that like people wanted to meet up, right? Which kind of made sense after COVID. And it like broke down because people couldn't agree on a time and a place and a date to meet up. And I thought it was mind-boggling because I was like, here's like let's say a dozen really like smart, like accomplished PMs. Like surely they face way more complex like stuff in their daily life and their work life, right? Than like just agreeing on a time and a place. So I just did the first 2 meetups. Just okay, I'm gonna be here at this time. I picked like a place that was like pretty easy to get to from public transport. Gave people like I don't know, maybe 2 weeks heads up. Made a reservation. Just put it out there. I was like, I'm going to be in this state, New York, and a month later, I'm going to be here in SF. Come if you want, but I'm just going to be there. Like, I'm just going to hang out. So I did the first versions of the meetup before then, learning what worked, what didn't work, what are common questions, before evolving it into what it is now, which is I pretty much don't host any meetup. I sometimes do when I travel because it's a great way to meet people. We typically have over 20 meetups a month in 4 continents of the world. And we have volunteer kind of meetup hosts, like the role that I did, who pick a time and a place in a location that's pretty central and just book a bar or a coffee shop or whatever. And we've had that pretty much every month for the last, I don't know, like close to 2 years. So it typically starts by like me noticing something, pattern spotting something. I'll probably come up with a quick 1-2 pager with the way that like Lenny likes to consume it. Probably get his thoughts, work on like a V1, and then just work with Lenny on the messaging when we're closer to that launch. And then we obviously will talk about how we'll measure success and things to like look out for. See how that performs, right? And then, like I said,
Right.
we'll either kill it if it doesn't work, or we will look to scale it. Like with meetups, how we scaled that was I hired Ria, who's been really great at just helping with all like the event creation and like event FAQ stuff. And she manages a lot of that because it went from me doing one a month to like very quickly like over 10 and then 15 and then 20 a month. So she thankfully takes on all of that, and I get more involved with like sponsorship discussions that we have with meetups, like more like say larger meetups, like for example during New York Tech Week or LA Tech Week. So I'll be more involved with maybe 3 to 5 of some of our biggest events of the year. So that's how that has scaled basically, and probably a good example.
Got it. Okay, this is a great segue. Let me dive more into the production of these meetups because I see so many communities out there and they struggle to put on member-led meetups. And you here with the Lenny's communities, I was looking at the stats that Lenny posted in one of his tweets this year and said basically this community organized 265 local meetups in 2023, which were hosted in 75 cities and 35 countries. That is like crazy big. And it's all done by a team of essentially you and Ria, so two people.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask you some more specific questions. So when you say that Ria helps with the logistics of putting on the event, like what are some of the behind the scenes stuff that you guys need to do for any particular meetup?
So I think it's like it's not that different if you spun up an event page for anything, whether for Zoom registration for an online thing or whatever. The event creation isn't the big thing, right? That's just creating whatever, a Luma, a
Yeah.
Partyful, Eventbrite, whatever you want to use. We use Luma and we're super happy with it. I saw, I think, Tim Ferriss and the MFM guys, I think they've been using River. And I think I spoke to Ray, and that's also a really great tool from the chats I had with them. Luma just happens to work very well for us. And anyone who goes on Luma, they've built like a pretty like intuitive product. So I don't think it makes sense to go into that side of things. I think the big one is just like setting up a kind of meetup guide and our like thoughts on how they should be run. And we have a section on before the meetup, during the meetup, after the meetup, as a host version of it and like an attendee version of it in case like people are just wondering what kind of happens. The host one is critical. I would say, and it goes back to like how I even spotted this at the beginning. I just set down some pretty big rules, and I think the most important ones were like, if you care about being the meetup host, which I define as like someone who's willing to take the time to reserve a restaurant or a bar or a coffee shop for folks to meet, we want to give you more power. You pick the date, you pick the place. The only guidance we'll give is that pick a date and a place. A date 2 weeks out, so we have enough time and folks have enough time to block things out from their own like busy lives. And a place, like ideally just make it somewhere that's like relatively easy to get to, and public transport, like whatever, right? Somewhere central in a nutshell. If you are willing to take that effort and just call up a place or book a place online, we'll go with whatever date you want or time you want. And I think this is key because what we saw in Slack a lot was that people would ask like, okay, is this place okay? How about this time? And this process would take like sometimes weeks, and then a lot of times it would actually go nowhere. So it was just like, how I say it is, if you want to be the meetup host, you rule like a monarch. Like democracy is great, but in this very specific world of like meetups and hosting them, you rule like a monarch.
Yeah. That's a
If someone
great.
else has a
Yeah.
request or something like that, that's great. And to the extent that we can cater for it, we will. Particularly on the dietary side, I'm always conscious of that. Same with alcohol, no alcohol, just making sure there's a place that can serve them. And most places typically do. But if there's something like, oh, could we do it a bit closer to X? Or, oh, could we do it on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday? The kind of advice there to the meetup hosts is if someone's asking you that, you can just tell them that this is, for this next time, this is how we're doing it. You're more than welcome to do it. You're more than welcome to host it for the time after, satisfying whatever you ask for. You rule like a monarch. And what that does, I think, is it just empowers people to pick something that works best or ideally for them, right? And as long as, like I said, it's in advance in terms of date and it's a central location, other people will show up. There's less back and forth. I don't know if you've ever tried to like schedule a meeting with some pretty senior or busy people in a group setting, right? But that very rarely is done in a day or like in an hour. And I just feel like this approach just streamlines so much of that. I think that's what, rather than on the tooling side, a lot of maybe, I don't know about other communities, but at least like before I came into this, I think that's why we weren't having as many meetups. And, as you pointed out, we had over 250 in a year. What was it, like 65 countries? 35
Yeah,
countries, sorry. Like,
35 countries.
that's, yeah, I think that's like the big reason why. I think people like going to them a lot more than organizing a date or a place. So just removing
Got it.
friction is like the most important thing.
Yeah, rule like a monarch. That's a rule that's gonna stick. Okay, now I have some very specific questions about this. Let's say I'm assuming that finding hosts is not a problem for you because the community is so strong and there's like a sense of belonging there. People are, you don't probably reach out to people about this.
No, we don't like do it for like new hosts. I'd say like probably the first year we did it, we didn't have as large of a footprint. I don't think the first year we ever did it, it was like 35 countries. I think it was more US focused. I think Lenny put out some social tweets about them, like about the meetups, and I think that drove like a lot of interest in listeners and subscribers in other countries being like, hey, what is this? Like, I want in on this. And some of those people like raised their hands to be a host, and we're super thankful for that. I think it's a great way, by the way, if you're the host of almost anything, right, to get to know a lot of people. When I moved to Mexico City for half a year or spent half a year in Mexico City, I started hosting meetups pretty regularly, at least monthly. And I found all my friends through that. And I was just okay, if I meet like even just one person that like I would love to grab coffee with one to one and hopefully and they want to as well. For me, that's like great. Pretty much like any event I go to or even like a social event, like a net new person this is, right? And the meetups that I did in Mexico City were like fantastic for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the host, like finding the host problem is not something you have. Now, the next one is what happens with the bills? Like, do you have any guideline about splitting the check or the cost of booking the place or anything like that?
Yeah, I think with the place, we definitely do not recommend folks to book a fancy place. Something casual, something chilled has always been like the vibes. Casual mingling has always been like the vibes of our meetup. Thankfully, like we've either had it where Lenny pays or gives a small stipend, right, which I allocate to meetups, so folks can at least get, say, a drink or something when they come, like on the house. And then after that, we would just advise meetup hosts to split it for whatever after.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times, definitely over the past year, we've actually had like a sponsor. So we typically have a sponsor for the month. And from whatever sponsorship money we get from them, past sponsors have been like Mixpanel, Notion, Code, AWS, Orb. I think those are like some of the more recent sponsors. So sponsors like that. And we'll give like a very large portion of that to just meet up like reimbursements. On the sponsorship side and on the more recent side, it's the host submits the bill and their PayPal. And then we just reimburse them fully for that. In like pretty much in all cases, we give each meetup host a budget the day before the meetup, and it's typically calculated based on how many people have RSVP'd. So it's pretty straightforward. We're not going to give a $500 budget for two people.
Yeah.
That's a pretty great deal, but we're not doing that.
Makes sense. And has it ever happened that you had to deal with a meetup not having enough attendees? Like somebody says that they're organizing something and they only had two people RSVP.
We probably had a few of them at the very beginning of that first year from learning. So now we actually just have a simple policy where Ria just makes sure to check. And if we have less than 5 RSVPs at the meetup, we recommend to the host that they should postpone or cancel. And that's just because, hey, we're not sure if there'll be enough people who will come. So just in respect of your time. Sometimes we get some hosts who are like, it doesn't matter. Even if it's just two people that show up, I'd love to have a conversation with them. And I'm just like, okay, fair play. We can do what we can do and try to be respectful of their time. But there are people who still want to go ahead. And even if it's 2, 3 people are grateful for that or want to do that. And we have no issues with that. We just want to make sure that if a host puts in the time and the effort, that they don't show up and there's like 2 people there. And because that can create a negative experience, right? That can create a negative experience. And that's a lot like to the extent possible, only want to create as many positive experiences as possible within Lenny's community.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually a great. It's when you say it, it sounds really simple. Like organizing a meetup with a community where people want to meet each other. It sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think it's just asking why does this not already exist or why does this like currently not work. And then you just realize it's a process thing within almost a bit of like human psychology, right? And I think that's what the product lens helps, that it's not that like people don't want to meet up or want to necessarily be difficult. They either don't want to like decisively feel like they are called like are like being the boss, like bossing people around by saying, okay, we're meeting up here. If they don't have some form of like guidance from us in this case, that hey, no, this is actually okay. We encourage this. And the other side is just people who like want to optimize for themselves. And it's just trying to like tread that fine line. Definitely in the world of meetups, I have actively thought about like how we can make the life of a meetup host as easy as possible.
Mhm.
In an ideal
Right.
world, they pick the time, the place, and everything else we take care of. We help them with, we give them a small budget where they can get some food and maybe some finger food and like some drinks. We take care of the distribution. They don't have to post anywhere, right? We basically almost guarantee that they'll have people show up, right? Like they can post for sure on their socials or whatever. We don't have anything against that. They can go ahead and do that. But given Lenny's reach, we also take care of that. The real actions on their side are just time, place, location, you know? Sorry,
Yeah.
time and place. I just repeated that. Time and place. It's the only two things. And they have to probably make a call or like an online reservation. That's everything else we take care of. Ria helps with the event pages. We have our kind of like distribution engine for like how people find out about like the meetups. And on the day they show up, that's the only action they do. Try to like be kind to people and just like guide them or say, hey, after the meetup, they submit a bill, like, and then we PayPal them after. That's just kind of it.
Love that. Yeah, love this playbook. I think this will be very helpful fit. I can already think of so many communities that can use this and run with it essentially. So thank you so much for sharing this, Shre. Let me segue and talk about some of the other initiatives that I've seen doing in the Slack. So talk about the mentor matching program that you run. What how does it run basically? How do you execute on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've probably had, I'm gonna say, at least four versions of the mentorship program. I did the first one along with Jess, and then I think Jess took more of a lead role for the second one, and I played a supporting one. The whole premise of it is that I just noticed junior folks asking for advice from more senior people, and I thought it's a pretty giving community. Maybe there's senior people who want to help like one mentee. Various versions of it, and thankfully every time it's gotten better. Right now we have an awesome volunteer team that do everything pretty much on this tool called Coda. They they do all the matching, I think, on Coda, and I think at least a couple of people on the team have created an algorithm, so they've coded something to match our folks. And then there's some other parts of the team that are very much focused on the mentor mentee experience. What does that look like? What kind of information should we guide them on? How often should we do check-ins? So there's, I would say, something close to 10 people, could be a dozen at this point. I just don't know how active some people are now. And they just like tag team it to take on a very specific part of the mentor mentee program that we run. I'm so grateful to each and every single one of them because, you know, and I think this is part of why I do the first run or try to do the first run of everything because I acutely know the pain points of running this. I have a good sense of what are mentees saying, what are mentors saying, like our actual users in this, but also on the process side. Because I think if you want to do it well, it is very process and operationally intensive because you're essentially talking about matching two human beings. And whether you look at like the dating apps of the world or whatever, there's literally like companies that invest millions of dollars in R&D for this thing called matching. And it's tough. And I think what they've done is incredible. Yeah, so the match I can go into matching. I don't necessarily want to bore you or your listeners, but that's how it's run. We have a pretty large team that do it very part time. They're all very passionate about the mentorship program. I had actually discontinued it because the effort required was just too large, and a lot of these people were like, "No, actually, we think it's great." And we care about it so much that we're actually gonna help run it. And instead of just whatever you or Jess, let's split that workload over 10 or a dozen people. And that's what I mean by the community being sometimes having very those heartwarming moments. I wasn't bullish, to be honest, that it would work from a lens of just because I think people's interests can dip like over time. But they really made it work, honestly. They like that mentorship team have really made it work, and I think they do a great job. We're now running the mentorship program a second time with this kind of team, essentially. Yeah, like I think it's great. A lot of the principles of the mentorship program we thought through based off First Round's mentorship program. And I think over there, so this is First Round Capital, which is like a venture capital fund, and they have from pretty much everyone I spoke to who's been a mentor there, a top-notch mentoring program. I'm pretty sure Lenny was a mentor at First Round a couple of years ago, and I actually know Lenny's, who also said it was like a great program. So I really have to thank like Julia Golfberg over there for just taking time during the earlier years of the mentorship program that we have here. Yeah, it's modeled on like the things we like a lot with First Round's mentorship program, which was quite a few things, and thankfully the torch
Can you go into
to
them?
work. Yeah, I think it's like really putting a lot of effort into matching, right? I think that's like first and foremost. And there's no like secret formula for it. I think a lot of communities, and probably I was guilty of this too in the early version, is like you have to go through everyone. Like you can create algos and stuff like shortlist people, and then we do that. But there, like if you are trying to match people that like are basically supposed to have a very intimate conversation, chances are like when you have a mentor or mentee, you sign up for it, certainly as a mentee, there are things going on that like you want someone senior that you want to talk through about. There is no click of a finger to nail matching. So matching is the big one. And then the second one that we're pretty focused on is like ghosting. And this is again, and it's probably a common theme for most people who run communities that like people can get excited about pretty much anything that's quote unquote say has free or has no additional cost to them. So they'll sign up. They'll sign up for like pretty much anything that's, oh, this is cool. But it's very different to show up consistently, right? And like our mentorship programs typically over a couple of months. And we have always had a small number of people who just ghost, who just like either it's a mentor or the mentee who just don't say anything and just never show up, but like the other person takes time out of their day and does show up, right? So we're like pretty laser focused on that. We just want to make sure in terms of the experience of the program that we know who these people are, and we just make sure we have signs to detect it and also prevent it, or at the very least just encourage like open communication about it. That's probably the second aspect of it. And then the third one, which I know Amy and the team have done a great job with, is like a workbook of what the mentee and the mentor can like work on together, what things they should fill in. How do you come up with something very like tangible where you can like maybe track the progress that you've been making, what you want to talk about the next time. I think a lot of the community stuff is like not being rocket science, but you need a pretty high EQ to like really understand and have empathy for the user and like what they're going through and like why they even signed up to like, some of these programs. I think Amy and the team have really done a great job of thinking through that and adding great things that like I frankly did not even think of. I was very focused on like matching during the early days. So those are probably three things: the matching, which is a beast of its own; reducing ghosting, or at least communication; and then the third is like focusing on that in-person experience, on kind of like how have you grown together and doing like some cool stuff around checkpoints and feedback and just like coming up with something there to make that experience maybe more real, if that makes sense. It's like going to the gym and you go every day, but you don't really know if you're getting better. And it's great if you go because you feel good about it. But I think people like to see that whatever, instead of benching 20 kilos, they can now do 32. And you might not realize it because it's incremental gains. But I think that's what Amy and team have also added like a new component of.
Love this. This sounds like a wonderful workbook. Is it possible to put that in the show notes somewhere, like maybe give the listeners an example of what you're talking about?
I'd have to ask Amy.
Okay. I'll follow up with you later after the show. If possible,
Yeah,
we'll put
sounds
it in the
good.
show notes. Okay. This is fantastic. Now, tell me this. Obviously, you have a really great volunteer program in the community that enables you to run all of these different initiatives. It's clear. So, talk to me a little about how you find volunteers and what you look for in them. Is it easy to find the volunteers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's easy to find active volunteers. What I mean by that is I think leave aside like the volunteer bit, it's just who's actually interested and like how do you detect if someone's interested? Chances are they like post or comment or reply in threads to a bunch of things, right? So I think that is like relatively easy to spot. For me, my lens of volunteers is like ideally you are someone that just naturally cares about this thing because then it just doesn't feel as much as work. That's what I look out for.
That makes sense. And do you have any, I don't know, any extra perks or things that the volunteers get besides the joy that they get from doing the work itself?
Yeah, we don't have that many volunteers. We have the mentorship team, which is amazing, and then we've got like some channel leads, which are great. Typically, you might have seen like the swag stuff
Yeah,
that like Lenny's swag store. We give them like swag packs, and if they come to a meetup, I try to introduce them to Lenny or things like that. Like I probably will in London as well, where we meet people, where like the London meetup hosts. So that's how we like would do it. We're very open to pretty much any incentives or any kind of things we can do to show our appreciation to them. I think a lot of it is also just like asking them, and I think sometimes they just have like pretty. It depends on the person, right? Like where, like what they may want, basically. So there's no standard program. The only standard one is probably that we will send out like swag gift packs out, but I think a lot of the more specific ones are just handled via DMs and are pretty varied, essentially.
makes sense. I saw that there was this message in one of the announcements channel where you put out a call for volunteers about different things that you wanted to explore in the community. I'm sure that's like a way you get the volunteers by asking for it.
Yeah, it was the only time we put out the call, and we had a really good response. I think what that resulted in were, I think, at least two channel leads, and a channel lead is just someone who helps moderate conversation on a specific channel. And again, that goes back to that someone's naturally interested in. If you're interested in, I don't know, marketing, we don't really want this person to be the channel lead for engineering. So in an ideal world, we just match this person with the marketing focused channel. So that's how we thought about that. There was also, I think, Daniela, who helped me a lot on the co-founder matching resources, and she had explicitly said that. And her motivation was just that she wants to be part of the program, right? She's looking for co-founders. She's really interested in entrepreneurship. So for me, that's what it just goes back to like how I assess fit to something specific and just someone's like motivation. I think that if you force yourself to do something and the person's volunteering for it, or even if you like pay them, I think it will fizzle out unless if they're naturally interested in it. There's a reason why I only work with product communities. I've been approached for definitely like a few more over the past few years, but there's a reason why I only do product communities so far, and the reason is I was a PM. I knew of Lenny, I knew of Shreyas, I knew of Nikhil long before they knew who the heck I was. And that's because I was a fan of their product. I was a consumer of their content and the things that they would say. So I'm a believer of it myself, and that's also how I like just look for volunteers essentially.
I love this. It's been so fantastic chatting with you so far, Shre. I want to wrap up the show by giving the listeners some advice, some specific advice. So I want to give advice for the people who have audiences. Let's say they have a newsletter which has thousands of subscribers, maybe some of them are paying, and they are thinking of maybe starting a community. So I want to leave them with some tangible advice. So first of all, why would you say they should or should not start a community, private community with that audience?
I think why they should, if they want to just engage with their audience, right? I think before you start a community, you really have what you have is like an audience, right? You have people that engage with your content. At best, will reply to you on YouTube comments or Substack comments or like via email, but you don't really have that peer-to-peer engagement, right? They can't really engage with another listener unless they like reply to their YouTube comments or whatever, right? It's not easy, basically. So I think that is always interesting for them just to see, to be able to engage with their own audience, to be able to see how like audience to audience engagement can look like. And like I said, you definitely have some heartwarming moments that can result in it. And it must be a cool feeling for Lenny to be like, hey, my podcast episode or this newsletter resulted in whatever these two people, whatever, like having a good discussion or getting a job out of it. Like I'm sure we have helped with people getting jobs. We just don't track it very well, but I'm sure we have. So that's number one. I think number two, brand building wise, I feel like it can really augment your brand. And if you think of just like meetups and like people posting photos of it organically, that helps other people know about like Lenny's podcast or newsletter, even if they didn't. Like even if they didn't before, if people do post about stuff like that. So there's that component that I think is good to be able to tap into new people. If you have a subscription, it can help with retention. As to how much, I don't know. Like I said, I only had that biased poll that someone else asked, but it can definitely help with things like retention and monetization broadly. Yeah, those are probably like the
Yeah.
three ones that come straight to mind. Why not to do one? It takes work. Like
Mhm.
it's not something that you just set up a Discord or a Slack or whatever and it like runs on autopilot. It takes work. I work with Lenny and like I he pays me, so it costs money. And I've been working with him for 2.5 years. So that's one. Number two, the downside of opening it to an audience is that you don't control what someone else is going to say. And it's like at least semi-public, right? When you have that, there's going to be some form of risk involved. That's like a user risk, and you don't, like, it's like anyone can say something on Slack or Discord, just like anyone could say something on Twitter, right, or Reddit. We probably have less of that because it's more of a professional space and everyone has to use their full names. But there will be an aspect of that, and probably more so for people who use like other platforms other than Slack. And I think the third one, and this is probably more for people who are starting off, is community sounds great, but apart from the work required to like start it, I think the biggest mistake I see is people starting it too early, and it quickly becomes a ghost town. And that's something that's like hard to recover from, in my opinion. So yeah,
What do
three
you mean? Can
reasons
you
for and against.
can
It
you
kind of
just
just goes
tell me more?
back.
What's the right time to start a community? Yeah.
So there's no formula for this as to like when's the start right time. I think it must. I think there's a lot of definitions for product market fit. I know Todd Jackson probably came up with a good one during Lenny's one, but in this case with communities, I think it's just like when you probably feel it, right? When you feel that people are replying more to your Substack releases, when people are replying to your YouTube episodes, when people actually give enough of a shit to like literally as small as like a react or drop a comment. I think when you have that and people are like replying to you in some form, I think it's a good sign. How many replies and all that, like I'm not gonna pull an answer out of my ass because I don't know. But I know that early version of Lenny started because he first had a small Slack with some of his more like passionate subscribers. That's how it starts. And it's definitely gotta be more than like a couple of people.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Then final question. So let's say I feel like I've crossed this threshold and I know I want to start a community. Then what does the MVP here look like? Like what's the minimum amount of effort that I can put in, or maybe the minimum amount of things that I can offer to people joining my community and still call it community? Like I can probably not run the in-person meetups, mentor mentee matching, and all of these different programs that you are running now from day one.
Yeah.
What should I do? Yeah.
I think it's so context dependent, right? It's really dependent on the community. So there's a version where you could like probably just do an in-person meetup before you do a community. But that just depends
Mm.
if your listeners are probably like concentrated in a similar area, right? And you probably could do that and just see who's bothered enough to come, right? I have no idea if that Brian Johnson guy has an online community. Maybe he doesn't, but I've definitely seen his meetups, right? I think there's a world where you can do that, like that as MVP before the community. I think if you want to go down like creating a Slack or a Discord or whatever tool you want to use to host your community, in terms of offers, I mean, there's a reason why people sign up or are bothering to reply to you. And I think a lot of the answers will be there. A lot of the times, it might be that they just want to interact with you as the producer of the content or the actual, say, quote unquote creator. And then that's pretty clear. It just means that you have to be active, and some people can't do that. Yeah, I think a lot of it will just stem from what people are like replying with. And that
Yeah,
can just it could be so many different answers. You just
yeah,
have to read.
yeah,
Some things just
basically.
are not scalable, right? Reading every single message on every public channel, or at least skimming through it like every day. It's not a scalable thing, but that's like the best kind of like incubation kind of process because you want to see what people are like just commenting or posting when there's no real incentives involved, when no one's telling them they have to do it, when no one's paying them to do it. I'm a big believer of just like observing people when there's no like immediate incentives in play. And hopefully that will, I think that also includes when people bother to reply to that content producer about their thoughts. It could be as simple as thank you so much for your content, right? And then you can always follow up with something, right? You can always ask them back because chances are people are thrilled to hear from that podcast or that newsletter writer that they are reading or listening and clearly bothering to reply to.
That makes a lot of sense, and this is such fantastic advice. Watch what people are doing when nobody's looking, and that can inform so many of your initiatives in the community. So, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, Shre. This has been fantastic. Learning from you and learning the about the magic sauce of Lenny's community.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you very much for having me. I don't think there's a magic sauce per se. I think we have a great team of volunteers. I think we have a great group of members there who really act in the best interest of the community, and we're very thankful to have them, basically. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, talk to you soon.